How does the death of one of the world's most wanted drug traffickers reshape the balance of power across North America? The man known as El Mencho carried a $15 million US bounty, commanded a cartel responsible for a third of incoming narcotics at one point, and built a paramilitary force with rocket launchers and armored vehicles. This video unpacks what his killing reveals about state power, cartel resilience, and the fragile equilibrium between enforcement and escalation. If this moment weakens the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, trafficking routes, fentanyl supply chains, and cross-border violence could temporarily shift. If it triggers fragmentation, rival factions may compete with greater brutality. The outcome affects not only Western Mexico, but US overdose trends, regional security cooperation, and the credibility of governments that have invested years pursuing cartel leadership targets. Nemesio Rubén Oseguera Cervantes was killed during a Mexican military operation in Jalisco that left 6 others dead, 2 suspects detained, and 3 soldiers wounded. Authorities seized armored vehicles and heavy weapons, underscoring the cartel's firepower. Road blockades and vehicle burnings erupted soon after, reflecting a familiar pattern in which enforcement actions spark rapid, coordinated retaliation designed to overwhelm local security forces and Project Defiance. Born in Mexico, Oseguera Cervantes entered the United States illegally in the 1980s and lived in California before multiple arrests on drug charges led to deportations. After serving a prison sentence in the early 1990s, he returned to Mexico and began consolidating influence. His trajectory illustrates a recurring cross-border dynamic: migration, criminal networks, incarceration, removal, and reintegration into domestic organized crime structures. Around 2011, after splitting from the Mencho Cartel, he helped form the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, commonly known as CJNG. US authorities later described the organization as deeply involved in manufacturing and trafficking fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine, alongside extensive money laundering operations. By 2019, the Drug Enforcement Administration assessed that CJNG controlled roughly 1/3 of narcotics entering the United States by certain routes. The scale of violence associated with CJNG distinguished it from many competitors. Former US officials characterized Oseguera Cervantes as a top enforcement priority, emphasizing his access to military-grade weapons, including rocket-propelled grenades and .50 caliber firearms, and his reliance on tactical units resembling private security teams. That capability allowed the cartel to assert territorial dominance, intimidate rivals, and challenge state authority in open confrontations. In 2015, cartel gunmen shot down a Mexican military helicopter with an RPG during a government campaign in Jalisco. In 2020, an assassination attempt targeted Mexico City's police chief, who survived despite the use of high-powered rifles and grenades. 2 bodyguards and a civilian were killed. These operations demonstrated planning, intelligence gathering, and the willingness to strike high-profile officials in major urban centers. CJNG also combined spectacle with coercion. Prosecutors have alleged kidnappings aimed at pressuring authorities, including the abduction of Mexican Navy members in 2021 linked to the arrest of Oseguera Cervantes' wife. Recruitment tactics reportedly included deceptive job advertisements that funneled applicants into forced service, with violent consequences for those who resisted. In March, search groups uncovered charred remains and personal effects at a suspected training site. The United States intensified pressure through indictments and financial sanctions. At the time of his death, the State Department offered $15 million for information leading to his arrest. His son, known as El Menchito, received a life sentence in March 2025 after US convictions on drug and weapons charges. Federal prosecutors have also used terrorism designations to pursue associates accused of supplying grenades and other materiel. These measures reflect a broader strategy: decapitation combined with legal and financial disruption. Yet history shows that removing a leader does not automatically dismantle a network embedded in supply chains spanning precursor chemicals, clandestine laboratories, maritime routes, and retail distribution cells across multiple states. CJNG's revenue has depended heavily on fentanyl production, a market driven by demand in the United States, where overdose deaths have surged in recent years. Consider the first what-if scenario. What if Oseguera Cervantes' death fractures CJNG into competing factions? Fragmentation can reduce centralized coordination, but often increases localized violence as lieutenants contest territory and smuggling corridors. Smaller groups may adopt unpredictable tactics, complicating intelligence efforts and straining municipal police forces already facing resource constraints and corruption risks. Now consider a second possibility. What if succession proves orderly, with a pre-designated leadership structure maintaining operational continuity? In that case, short-term violence might subside after symbolic retaliation, while trafficking flows resume with minimal disruption. Stability within the organization could preserve existing alliances with suppliers and distributors, limiting immediate shifts in drug availability despite the high-profile loss. Regionally, Mexico's government faces the dual challenge of projecting strength while preventing escalation. Military operations demonstrate capacity, yet each confrontation risks civilian harm and economic disruption, as seen in burned vehicles and blocked highways. For Washington, cooperation on intelligence sharing, extraditions, and financial tracing remains central, particularly as fentanyl precursors often originate in Asia before transiting through Mexico. There is no verified evidence linking this episode to policy decisions by India's government or to actions by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Introducing unrelated political claims would obscure the concrete mechanisms at play: organized crime evolution, bilateral enforcement strategies, and market incentives. The drivers here are institutional capacity, criminal adaptability, and cross-border demand, not distant administrations unconnected to the operational theater. Ultimately, the killing of El Mencho tests whether state authority can outpace cartel regeneration. Power vacuums invite contestation, disciplined succession preserves continuity. Viewers should watch indicators such as shifts in homicide rates in Jalisco, changes in fentanyl seizure volumes at US borders, and emerging names within CJNG's hierarchy. Stability and conflict coexist in cycles, and the next phase will hinge on whether pressure translates into durable structural disruption rather than another turn in a long war.